Hey everyone, Taylor here, and thanks for listening to the Bonfire Briefing Podcast. Sorry if there's a little background noise during the intro and outro. I've got the dishwasher and the dryer running, but really good to be back in my apartment. I flew back in from Tennessee after a week and a half long vacation, went to visit some friends and family there, but it was a really good time. I even recorded a podcast with my buddy Alex while I was down there, but this week, my guest is the Libertarian candidate for Lieutenant Governor in Iowa, Marco Battaglia. He's running alongside Rick Stewart to restore liberty and freedom to the state's highest executive office. We talked about a lot: ending eminent domain, returning power to local level office holders, ethanol, ballot access, and so much more. It was a really awesome conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy. All right, here we go. Marco Battaglia, welcome to the show.
All right. Now, if you want to restart, it's Battaglia, technically.
Battaglia. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Wasn't sure if I was going to get that that right or not.
Nah, some people, I think, do pronounce it the other way. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you know. I don't know if you know Tom Quieter, or Quieter rather. I messed up his name too when I talked to him. I just, there's a couple different ways you can go with the
I know that I know who that is, but for some reason, I think it's someone I've known a long time. What's his story? What's he?
Yeah,
is he running for something?
Yeah, he's running.
Oh
for
yeah,
Senate,
okay. Yeah. I met him a couple national conventions ago.
Oh yeah, no, he was a great guy, but you could go a couple of different ways with his last name too, and I took the wrong one.
That's all right.
But how have you been, man? I know we were going to record this, a while back, and I actually got some vacation time, flew back to Tennessee, and visited with my family. But we're finally here, man. How's the campaign trail been treating you?
Surprisingly positive. I really got a lot of positive things to report. For one, I think Rick Stewart has been a great candidate just for Iowans in general, but especially a great Liberty candidate because I think he's very relatable. He had a successful co-op that he ran here in Iowa, and he's been he's been a Iowan that can relate to other Iowans, but he's also traveled the world a bit and worn a lot of different hats. Like he ran a co-op, he was a former law enforcement officer, and he's retired while I'm still an active duty correctional officer, and we're really short. So we're one of the many state agencies that are short staffed. So I get to see that kind of crises firsthand, and I work, more than 40 hours a week on a regular basis, and he is retired, so he's on RegBri right now, which is the big bicycle across the state event here in Iowa, and he's going to be at the state fair. Between him and I will be at the Iowa State Fair talking to people pretty much every day of the fair. So but yeah, he's been campaigning, as I would say, as hard as any non-Democrat, non-Republican candidate in Iowa history. So I really hope, we come out strong with, an end result that shows some return on all that hard work he's been doing.
Oh man, I actually lived in Iowa. My first job out of college was a financial job in Des Moines area in Iowa. So I moved up there. And
I was in financial crimes for about a decade before I worked in corrections.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Iowa State Fair, and I got to say, I'm from Tennessee. I live in Texas, and, fairs and things like that are pretty big down here, but you guys take the state fair to the next level. You really do. The Iowa State Fair, for people that, are not aware, never had the pleasure of going. It is, massive, I think is, maybe the best word to kind of sum it up into one. I think the the year I went, it was my first year in Iowa, and Slipknot was there.
Yep, I was at that. I
Oh
actually
man.
I come from those communities. I'm a bass player, and we actually have a really awesome heavy metal concert happening in the Drake neighborhood tonight. But I was out campaigning and passing out campaign materials all weekend, so I didn't go to any of the other cool events we had this weekend. But it works out. This one's later tonight, so I can get to it.
Oh man, it's crazy. You said I have not played in a while, but I was a bit of a bass player back in college, and I used to play stuff like Black Sabbath and
Oh yeah, that's
Metallica, that
the
kind of.
same place as where I came from. I been playing ever since I was a little kid, and it was watching like Cliff Burton and Geezer Butler from Sabbath and Metallica that really
Oh
made me
man.
want to pick up that instrument specifically. But yeah, no, and that's one thing that's cool too. Is Rick is an older candidate. He's retired, which gives him time to campaign around. But I'm younger as far as candidates go, and I do come from kind of some different communities. I've played music or worked as a bouncer, security for music, in pretty much all the venues, ranging from the nice ones to the dive bars, all around the Midwest. So I definitely have. I think we're a good team because we come from some very different backgrounds, but we come to a common ground on a lot of the issues, and actually a lot of the issues that Iowans are talking about this cycle. It's almost like a perfect storm right now.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask what, because since I live in Texas now, and I haven't really been keeping up with Iowa politics since I left. The caucus was actually going on when I lived in Iowa, so there were all these different candidates traveling around and things like that. But what are some of the big issues that Iowans are facing this cycle?
Um, a a big one right now. Well, it's actually been big for as long as I've been of voting age. Is how the state uses eminent domain,
Mm.
and there's some pipeline projects right now that are actually aimed to like sequester carbon. So they're selling it on sort of in the sell is an environmental reason. So what's really interesting about this issue is in the last decade or couple decades, you have pipelines for all these different reasons and different things that they transport or different things that they're meant to do and accomplish. So depending on what type of pipeline it is, you'll have people from one side of the political spectrum that are opposed to it. And then if it's a different kind of pipeline or it sells the right way, then you have people from the other side of the spectrum opposed to it. I think Iowans are really starting to see through that and see that, you can have your own opinion on what kind of project it is, but what we're really trying to highlight is that if it's not a voluntary agreement for the land use, that we don't want the state to abuse eminent domain just because the people trying to build the project are their wealthy donors or influential. So where we stand is just a firm stance every time this comes up here in Iowa. Like we've been at protests with people from all over the political spectrum on the ground and just firmly against eminent domain abuse, regardless of how, what the specific project is or what they're trying to sell it as. Just you got to agree with these things. You got to get property owners to agree that it's a fair deal. And if that doesn't happen, sorry, you don't get to use the state to take people's land is where Rick and I come from.
Right. I imagine that has to be a pretty popular issue to consolidate support around. I mean, I remember living in Iowa. You would drive, and I remember seeing like billboards and signs and things like that saying stop eminent domain, end
Hmm.
eminent domain. So you say this is, it's I remember it being an issue back when I lived in Iowa. You're saying that that's still,
Yeah,
as
it's
much a prevalent
still
issue today.
is, and the thing is that the Democrats and Republicans in office, a strong majority of both, have been completely okay with abusing eminent domain for private projects, and it is definitely a wedge issue for us from both the other candidates, DeGier and Reynolds, because neither of them have spoke out against eminent domain abuse. There was actually a bill in the legislature last session to make it clear that basically make it a lot harder for the state to just go ahead and allow eminent domain to be used and abused. And it was very clear that the leadership in the legislature and the governor made sure that got pulled so they wouldn't have to deal with it.
Mm,
Um, so I think the people that pay attention, it is definitely part of the reason why Rick and I have we were included in a poll for the first time, and we got 5% in this first poll, which to my knowledge is better than any non-Democrat, non-Republican candidate ticket has done in Iowa in election history. So we're really hoping to only move upward from there. But I think that's part of the reason is issues like this one where we stand out from the other two. It's like it just happened to align with the libertarian position when you have Democrats and Republicans that are showing concern for property rights, and their legislatures and the governor are either silent or working against them.
right. Well, what are some of the other big issues that you're finding resonate with people down there? Because I actually I talked with Dan Berman, Dan
Hmm.
Taxation is Theft Berman,
Yeah.
a few weeks back, and we were just we were talking about a couple different things, but one of the key points from our discussion was that we both feel like libertarianism is the default setting
Hmm.
for people, and they're just kind of forced into this duopoly.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things you're
that
finding resonate?
that's a real struggle here because we go to a rural area that's been voting Republican their whole life, and they automatically talk to us like we're their Democrat opposition, and we go to one of the liberal centers in Iowa, and they automatically are like, "Oh, you're just Republicans that are okay with marijuana and all that." That I'm sure every libertarian has heard a million times, and we're
Right.
trying to prove different. But another issue is, um, well, ethanol, which is kind of connected to these pipelines. Basically, the last cycle our governor had, she could have really shown if she was a principled liberty person, because she could have championed damn near anything, and she chose, really hammering through ethanol mandates as her pet issue, which I think people from all over the political spectrum are starting to see kind of the basic economic problem with distorting the agricultural markets here. Um, it basically leads to, it amounts to, in reality, incentivizing more runoff and impaired waterways, and basically propping up this one form of corn ethanol over the other options, which, pretty much every libertarian can see the problem with distorting the markets in that way. And especially now with broader food crisis, like we're incentivizing people to grow field corn that's not really good for much besides ethanol and some more kind of unhealthy food options, when if maybe they, my hope is when they're not incentivized to just keep growing field corn, that will grow more nutritious foods and medicines here in the soil here in Iowa. Um, Another one, so that's kind of tied to clean water, which is a huge issue, more coming from activists on the left side of the spectrum, but where I try to get encourage people from the other side and libertarians all over the spectrum to get into that is, you're having a hard time with if you have a recreation business or you do some sort of recreation on the water and you don't know when the waterways are going to be open or safe to use.
Right.
Obviously, that's hurting a lot of people's pockets. And if you get water from a city source, they're racking up your bill to pump out all these nitrates from the water. So it really is a liberty issue in my mind. The issues about impaired waterways and clean water, because you're basically getting triple taxed. You're getting taxed to incentivize the crop that is specifically causing the problem disproportionately, and then you're getting taxed to help clean up the problem, which we haven't really figured out a good way to take people's money and actually solve that problem. And then you are seeing it in your water bill if you get water from a public water. And if you got a private well, well, then if you're not doing something to maintain that well and keep it safe, then you're basically having a real hazardous situation.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
mean,
Another big one is, I would say, kind of just Rick is really eloquent about pointing out how he'd like to see more decisions made at the local level, whether that's city level, county, school boards. Like, we have it's kind of fascinating, really, because we have a really sort of unpopular governor, but yet among the people that vote regularly, they go out and keep voting for her. So that's kind of the dilemma that anyone that is running against this incumbent is dealing with. And um, I think there's really an effort to sort of cherry pick these issues that, both sides of the larger parties do it, that fire up their base and then take, executive action from the top down, which is really something that, if Rick got in there to work for the people, he would encourage the opposite, to that he shouldn't really get involved in, um, say, an issue as, um, really, you can take any pick of things the governor's done over the last cycle, and he probably would rather see that resolved in the, at the community level, because Iowa is really, there's a really dramatic difference when we're campaigning through some of the smaller cities and the more
right.
rural areas, and when we're in like Des Moines or Cedar Rapids. And I think people would be a lot happier if they were kind of solving these issues among more so among their like-minded people, rather than kind of aiming, throwing this meat to your base and just aiming people against each other, at the state level, from the authoritarian perspective of the governor issuing a decree, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're definitely right. Like, she is, she definitely governs from the top down, and she's always in the news for something negative. It seems. I mean, I haven't, when she pops up in my timeline, it's usually not a positive headline. I mean, what do you think it is that keeps drawing voters to her? I mean, why is it
Um,
that the Republican base there isn't seeing,
I
what
think
she's doing?
it's sort of this broader, um, the negative aspects of populism, I think, that have happened all over the world, and in particular here in the last few cycles. Like, she has still, she's basically never said an ill word about President Trump, whether, not even a constructive criticism, basically for fear of losing that endorsement, I think.
Right.
And I think we really have to stop fearing our politicians, and we can vehemently disagree on one issue, and still, um, work together and not, take up arms against each other and all that. So I think that's part of it. I also think the way Iowa is set up has actually made it, really hard for anyone that's not a Democrat or a Republican to participate. So for the longest time, people didn't have another viable option besides they pick whichever one is more relatable to them, and they
Right.
stick with it. And we've been working hard to change that. And I think we're getting closer and closer to changing that. But like, for example, if these polls are accurate and it gets, even, kind of the bare minimum that we would like to see would be that 5 to 10%, and that would still be really damaging to the illusion of a two-party system. So our low bar is hoping to smash that illusion here in Iowa and break open the door for acknowledging that we have a multi-party system, and maybe making it so the next time someone runs, it's not like right out the gates you're um, just pegged as, oh, this is not you're put on a different level than the Democrat and the Republican candidate, as opposed to starting the race at the same spot.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to talk about uh, ballot access because so my second episode was with Michael Wilson, and he's libertarian running for governor in my home state, Tennessee. And libertarians have to jump through so many hoops in Tennessee just to get on the ballot. And he told me all this, and it absolutely blew my mind. If you want to get on the ballot in Tennessee as a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, you only have to get 25 petition signatures. Very easy, very doable. Could knock that out no time at all. But if you want to run on the ballot as a libertarian, you have to get it's based on the amount of votes that were cast. It's a percentage of the amount of votes cast in the previous election. And so while Republicans, Democrats, and independents only had to get 25 signatures, Michael Wilson had to get, I think it was 56,000 signatures and
Yeah,
some change.
I saw that, and which is really unfortunate because I've actually, we've followed each other for quite some time, and I think he's a great candidate. And actually, we seem to be like-minded on a lot of the current issues,
Oh,
especially. And
he's awesome, man.
um, yeah, and I know how hard it has been here because I've participated, um, certainly working for other candidates for, decades now, but as a candidate for over a decade now in different races. And it's really tough even here. And then I look at these other states where it's damn near impossible, even compared to how hard it is here to meet the bars they set for us. It's like, I grew up thinking it was awful here for additional parties and independents, and then I see it's even worse in a lot of other states.
Yeah. What kind of what kind of barriers do they set for
Um,
y'all in Iowa?
so here it is really the signature gathering process and the start date. So recently they had tried to move the start date up. So we basically had to go out, start in the winter, collecting signatures, which the tough part about Iowa is the elements can be against you almost year
Oh
round.
man.
If it's either too hot or too cold, you're gonna have a hard time with that signature gathering. And it was, um, during COVID and everything. So I think between the changes they made to the start date on gathering signatures and upping the total amount of signatures, also doing that right after coming out of the COVID years, where it was all everybody talked about forever, and it uh, that made it a unique challenge, and we have fewer candidates this cycle to show for that, which it's partially why I'm really glad that Rick is hitting it so hard and showing positive signs of progress when it comes to polling and things like that, because this will, if we really do either succeed those early polls or at least hit them, this will be the first time a gubernatorial ticket has gotten us what they call major party status in Iowa. Because in Iowa, it's tied to the top of the ticket, whether we keep being viewed by the Secretary of State as a quote unquote major party. So even though we've grown significantly over 50 years, but certainly just in the last decade, leaps and bounds, we can still fall back to not being seen as a major party if the top of the ticket doesn't get 3% of the vote. And so that either means the presidential candidates or the gubernatorial candidates, when it's not a presidential election, have to hit at least that threshold, which to me is pretty nonsensical. Because I think I'm definitely one that thinks local elections are of the utmost importance, and it kind of
Right.
makes it so we have to focus on that top of the ticket, whether we want to or not, because it's tied to so many other things, and making it easier for candidates to run in local races. So it's a pretty bad system that I would like to, I've been an advocate for changing that. And I do think we see some momentum there. Like we have a statewide official who's the auditor, Rob Sand, who seems to be genuine and pretty good when it comes to viewing ballot access in terms of fairness and being equitable to the other parties. So I'm hoping that he kind of breaks the mold and we can get, people like the Secretary of State that feel that way, and like the treasurer and the basically, I hate that those positions are partisan anyway.
Right.
Because I was the attorney general candidate in the last cycle, running against just a Democrat. There was no Republican candidate. And, everywhere I went, people wanted to make it about the partisan issue and the partisan divide, where I'm like, um, the actual roles that these positions are intended to do, you'd serve people a lot better if they weren't, partisan like every other political race. But, but yeah, that's our biggest burden, is having that being tied to the top of the ticket, which I'm hoping comes back to backfire on the people that wanted to use that, weaponize that. And if this is the first cycle, our gubernatorial ticket does well over the threshold, and then next cycle our presidential ticket does well over that threshold, that'll be literally the end to the illusion of a two-party system. So I'm hoping we're finally seeing that on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean that would be really awesome.
I think it'd be really good for the citizenry too. No matter what their particular individual thoughts are on the issues, I think it'll be a really positive thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, having more options, just to me, seems like a no-brainer. I mean, if you're a voter, you want as many options as possible. People don't want to get stuck in that duopoly, and I always feel like they're voting against the lesser of two evils, right? Like they want a candidate that they feel like, matches their views and that they can proudly cast their vote. And it's crazy that we set up so many barriers to stop that from happening. I know I know you and Rick are big fans of ranked choice voting,
Yeah.
as am I. Do you think it's, how likely do you think it is that Iowa might see
Well,
something like that in the next few cycles?
it sounds like there's a couple local elections that are going that way, which is positive.
Oh, really?
I think I'd have to double check to be sure, but I thought Cedar Rapids was one that had already had an election that was considered kind of ranked choice. But yeah, I think there is movement on that, at least in a few of our cities, and I think it'll take a while to see that at the state and federal level, but is definitely seems to be more broad support for it than ever before that I've noticed. So I'm hoping that means sooner rather than later. Um, but yeah, no, things like that. And one thing I've noticed over the last decade is there's really not a lot of there's not a lot of ways for people that are not registered as Democrat or Republican to have a say in the political process at all in Iowa. If you have a primary election, you have to register as one or the other to participate. So I think that really kind of creates this illusion that there's more strong-minded, more people that are happy considering themselves Democrat or Republican than there actually are, because a lot of people, do find the people that find voting to be important. They register as Democrat or Republican to participate in the early parts of the process, the caucuses and the primaries, and then, uh, and I don't think they're really that happy with what's going on in the Democrat or Republican parties, but that's the only way they can participate in Iowa still to this day.
Right. I was going to ask because like I said, when I was living in Iowa, the caucus was going on and everything like that. Do libertarians have a caucus, or how does that work?
So the last cycle, we basically, when Johnson and Weld ran as a ticket for president, they did so well that we achieved that top of the ticket party status. So then we had our first primary. It was myself and Jake Porter were in the Iowa gubernatorial primary, and we got
Mm.
national attention. We had debates on mainstream media, and I think it was really great for the party and for the liberty issues to be discussed at that level. And then we had caucuses um, for our presidential candidates last cycle, which was Jorgensen and Cohen. And so, yeah, we got a taste of that whole, I guess, doing what the other parties have done historically here in Iowa. Um, and then uh, and then they took it away. But then I'm hoping we'll smash that out of the park, and hopefully them taking it away from us will be a thing of the past after this cycle is one of my big goals. But yeah, so long story short, we've had a little bit of that caucus and primary experience as a state party, but that's been a recent phenomenon.
Oh, that's interesting. Man, we're gonna wrap up here before too long. I wanted to kind of backtrack some. I wanted to ask this earlier in the conversation, but we kind of got right to it. You've ran for office a number of times, and I wanted to ask, how did you and Rick meet, and how did you get involved in libertarian politics in the beginning? What's kind of your story there?
Yeah. I never thought I would step out from behind the scenes and be a candidate, but it was actually there was an Iowan. His name was Benton McKenzie, and he got arrested for growing his own cannabis, and they came after his whole family. And this was when Kim Reynolds was the lieutenant governor, and
Mm.
Terry Branstad was the governor, and I was phoning their office, showing up to events, just trying to get either of them to recognize how poorly I thought this man and his family were being treated, um, and just seeing that was still kind of how our justice system was working, and still the status of seeing cannabis as a helpful medicine in Iowa. That was like my enough is enough moment. And I ran for office the first time, being inspired by just how poorly that individual and his family got treated, and knowing, it could happen to so many other individuals and their families. And
Right.
that was about 10 years ago. But
What did you run
my
for?
initially, I was actually just I was running for governor, but trying to get, as an independent, trying to get attention to our Libertarian candidate at that time was Dr. Lee Heeb. And there was another candidate, Dr. Doug Boutier. He was actually in the race against Joni Ernst and Bruce Brawley. And he was just a fantastic candidate, one of the best I think we've probably had in the entire country, for my money, for the Libertarian Party, because he was a well-respected um, doctor and first responder, and um, he was just very eloquent on the issues and well liked in the community. And he got in a plane crash right before the election and passed away.
Damn.
It was horrible, but also his memory really still inspires me to this day. So then I ran for, after that, I was in the gubernatorial primary against Jake Porter, and we actually had a really close primary, which was good for the party, I think. And then when Jake won the primary, the party nominated me to run against Tom Miller, the Attorney General, who's the longest serving Attorney General in the nation. We have way too many of those
Oh,
records
wow.
here in Iowa, and he was running unopposed. So I campaigned my damnedest through election day. I actually got invited to 4 or 5 debates, but he turned everyone down because he was the incumbent, and he knew it would be to his disadvantage to even give me that sort of footing.
Right.
Um, and I think some positives did come out of that. Like, he's finally talking about allowing fentanyl test strips, and that was something that I thought was a no-brainer during that cycle that I didn't hear him mention once, and now he is on board with that. So I think some positive things came out of challenging him. We finally got caught up on the backlog of test kit. Rape test kits and testing those on a timely manner. And that was something that I made a central part of my campaign. And then it seemed like he kind of lit a fire under him to get that done. So I felt positive about that. And then I always thought that local elections were of the utmost importance. Then I ran for city council here in Des Moines and came in third out of 7 people. So I think we're resonating with people, and we keep moving up and up. And that was part of the reason why I teamed up with Rick. So Rick and we have known of each other and encountered each other just being active in both the state, local, national parties for over a decade now. So I wouldn't hitch my name to anybody that I didn't trust and feel was a really strong principled candidate. And where Rick and I like really hit it off was actually how passionate we were about like psilocybin and freedom to use psychedelics as medicine. Rick recently, he was at a protest at the DEA headquarters, um, and he got arrested for just a peaceful act of civil disobedience, basically just asking them to abide by the Right to Try Act, which was put in by President Trump. So basically, he just got handcuffed and carried out, and it wasn't much of a big deal. But I think the press here tried to use it to shine some negative light on him, which I think really backfired because the people I talk to, whether it's out in the community or on the different online forums, Reddit, Discord, and then all the social media and whatnot, there's been a lot of positive feedback. Like, hey, we are not libertarian or whatever. We might not vote for him, but we really respect that he was willing to take action. Um, on the right to try a substance like psilocybin. So for a libertarian, that's really like the bare minimum that you could try something like that when you're terminally ill. Like we obviously
Right.
want all people to be able to try that at all stages, but to me, like that's a no brainer that we would be in on that fight. So that was kind of what really impressed me initially, is that he was former law enforcement and then willing to be passionate about ending the war on drugs. And obviously allowing a freer market in cannabis and hemp is the first step, but then there's so much more to it when you talk about some of the other substances that are helping people. And I just thought it's nice to have an older gentleman with his background in Iowa that's really broken free from that whole two-party way of viewing those sorts of things. And I think we have a lot of respect, even when we do come from a different place on an issue. Abortion is another big one here, because after Roe versus Wade, the first thing our governor did is really make a solid stance that she wanted the state to get involved and have that heartbeat bill
Right.
take effect. And I've always come from kind of a full bodily autonomy, freedom sort of place, but Rick was more from the pro-life camp. But where we really agree is that we don't think the state, making people criminals over such a sensitive issue is the way to go. There's going to be a lot of negative consequences that come up from that. So I'm really hoping we kind of are bringing citizens together from both the pro-life and pro-choice camps that see better ways to handle that than making more criminals and locking more people up.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's really awesome that you guys could, despite some differences you have on abortion, could still come together and everything like that. That is just really awesome. I think we're gonna wrap it up here, man. I
Sure.
really appreciate you coming on the show. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Do you have any other things you want to throw in before we hop off here? Any upcoming events?
If anybody, Rick will be out on RegBri. We'll be at the Iowa State Fair, and then we'll be hopefully getting to the rest of the counties before the election, and hopefully 2 or 3 times, because Rick's really hitting it hard, and I'm out there as much as I can when I'm not on duty. And I think we should see some interesting developments, because I think there'll be some debates, hopefully. Even if Reynolds doesn't agree, I think Rick's going to debate the Democrat candidate, which will be, another historical moment for Iowa election history. And just check out rickstewart.com, and hopefully we can see this sort of competitiveness starting in every state. And I'm really kind of proud and honored that Iowa can kind of be like a beacon of hope for multi-party politics, and kind of I hope we start hearing the words tripartisan a lot more, especially on issues that we can start to agree on, like occupational licensing reform and cannabis and hemp and things like that. And as for the other issues, we'll work with the people on one side of the aisle on the Second Amendment freedoms, and we'll work with the people on the other side of the aisle on the things that we agree with there. And I really think we could be a positive voice and some positive representation, and hopefully kind of help stabilize some of the party stuff going on internally at the local and national level. So yeah, I feel pretty positive, really. Even with some of the turmoil going on, I feel like we got some good people that are putting in the work, and I think we're going to start to see results.
Yeah, I hope so, man. And I know you're going to be hitting that campaign trail pretty hard when you're out there at the state fair, but be sure to take some time and eat some of that good food they have over there. I already know, man. When I was there, I was running around that fair trying all this different stuff. So I know you'll be busy working, talking to voters, but sure,
I think
take some time out.
Disturbed and ZZ Top are 2 of the the bands playing this year.
No
So
way.
there's always
That's,
some cool
oh,
stuff
man.
to see.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
Man.
last time I was there, I saw Lita Ford and Queensryche. It was Iowa State. Iowa State Fair is a pretty fun place, and you got quite the mixture of people too. So it's a good place to rub elbows with a lot of different voters.
Oh yeah. Oh, when Slipknot was there, man, you would see like people were dressed up head to toe and the, you know, like all black, chains, spikes, everything, and then you would see like farmers walking around,
Yeah,
blue jeans and overalls and,
yeah.
and stuff like
I
that.
mean, I'm a people person, so I love it. I love walking around there, talking to people, and we'll hopefully get on, at WHO and some of the big media outlets, hopefully again. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we can do to maximize these results, and we'll keep giving them a headache for as long as we can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I hope the state fair and all the other campaigning you're doing goes well. I'm really rooting for y'all, and just really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, no problem. That's been great. Thank you.
All right. See you later.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, everyone. That was my conversation with Libertarian Lieutenant Governor candidate Marco Battaglia. I really enjoyed our conversation. We talked about so much. We covered so many different topics, and we even managed to squeeze in some fun Iowa State Fair banter. If you've never been, it really is crazy. Over 250,000 people a day go to that thing. It's really wild. But if you want to learn more about he and Rick's campaign for governor and lieutenant governor, visit rickstewart.com. You can learn more about them, donate, and they even have a shop if you're looking to pick up some cool libertarian gear. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. See y'all next week.